Welcome to the House of Truth. Today we're continuing our series on the kings of Israel. Last time we talked about the anointing of David and and some of these somewhat things that make people go, huh? In the story about that pertaining to demons and evil spirits as it's called there. And most importantly, the most important thing about it was his anointing wasn't just the oil Samson poured on his head to show that he was chosen as the next king, but it was the Spirit of God coming upon him, and how that gave him the ability to really rally the troops and lead them into battle. Well, the day we're going to look at overcoming Goliath. A familiar story for many people about David and Goliath. If a children's Bible has 10 stories, and this will be one of them typically. But there's a lot more to this story than we'll realize, a lot more than just what's on the surface there. He will just pass over it and miss some important things they need to know, particularly that pertain to their own life. Is everyone has a Goliath they have to face, and we all have to overcome it. Now we're going to begin with where Goliath came from. Where do you lead to? People say he's a giant. Well, we'll see how accurate that is, and see again where he came from, and how long this is taking. Because a lot of things with David, really, a lot of things we've been looking at ever since the time before our study before the patriarchs have been leading up to the life of David. And a lot of these things come to an end with David's life, and new things begin. It's really just a pivotal point in the entire narrative of all of Scripture. So let's begin here in Genesis 6:4, with starting with where these giants came from. There were giants in the earth in those days, and after that, when the sons of men came to the daughters of, after that, when the sons of God came to the daughters of men, and they bare the children of them, the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. Okay, first though, this word giants is Nephilim in Hebrew, but it just means giants. Doesn't make a lot out of that. But they were in the earth, the earth, it should be capital perhaps because it's the planet, in those days, the days before the flood. And after the flood also. And where these giants come from? The sons of God came into the daughters of men. And really, we should just take this at face value, what it means. Now, the sons of God weren't the line of Noah that was pure, and the daughters of men, those of Cain who were evil. When you go look in Job, you find the word sons of God is applied to the angels when Satan appeared before God, when Satan also appeared, when it was his turn, and accused Job. And we see that expression a couple other places, referring to angels. These angels came into the daughters of men. So angels, just like exactly what it means, was it came into unto. Usually when that expression's used, some man came into some woman and she conceived and had a child. That's exactly what it means here. And these women bare children of them. Now these became mighty men, the men of old, men of renown. And this is confirmed. This was universal and is confirmed by basically the mythology and the stories of virtually every ethnic group, ancient ethnic group anthropologists have ever studied, or we've looked at ruins of whatever from like the Aztecs or the Minoans or whatever, and they all mention some things: a creation, a flood, the dispersion of people from Babylon and these giants. And these giants are those men of renown. And these are often in Greek mythology, they're called demigods, like Perseus, whose father is a so-called god, which was an angel in reality. And he's a half human, half angel. Hercules, so on and so forth. Now, Noah, it said, was pure in all of his generations, meaning he has none of this angel blood in him. Now that it since but now his paternally, that's very obvious. He goes straight from him back through Seth to Adam. You know, as we can see right here, okay. But 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 it implies they could have gotten it through the line of his mother and so on and so forth. And the implication is they were polluting the human race, this hybridization. And these angels, these giants themselves were coming into human women and so on and so forth. And again, a lot of these mythologies like that of the Greeks have to also tell not just of men but of women of men who got involved sexually with a quote goddess, a quote goddess, and had children who had female children that came from them, but like Diana, head of the Amazons, aka Wonder Woman. She's always saying great Hera. Okay, she was a demigod as well as the Greek demigod, as the world Greeks call them. Not demigod, I'm sorry, demigod, as the Greeks call them, meaning half god. Okay, and those gods, lowercase, were angels in reality. Now, angels, remember, have physical bodies. We've seen it. We've seen if we've been going along, like in Manoah's day, one you gave him an offering and the angel touched it and went up. But other times they've eaten, like when they came to Sodom, like when they came with Abraham, they ate with him and so on and so forth. Okay, so they can take on a physical form, have a physical form, and they have a body. And Jesus said, when we're the resurrected body is like that of an angel. So they have a physical body that's immortal, and these angel and these descendants of theirs, direct descendants, seem to be semi-mortal, is the term the Greeks would have used, which means they wouldn't die from natural causes. They can only die from being killed, with a sword or killed violently in some manner. They would not just age out and die. And so we're going to see some evidence of that in a moment that perhaps that was the case. But it's literally these. It's not aliens. People have made suggestions these were aliens, and they came in and took human DNA and turned off the growth switch to make these giants or anything like that. Let's just believe what the Word of God says, what it literally says. Don't dismiss it as myth, but just believe what it says. The sons of God, that say angels, came in under the daughters of men. And these are the same ones that Peter said left their first estate and were cast into Tartarus. And if you read it in the Greek, this chamber like the abyss, down Sheol, where they were bound and chained, reserved for darkness. Which is why they quit. Which is why they quit doing this. At a certain point after the flood, God said they'd done this before the flood, and after the flood, He put an end to it. And perhaps it's just simple as someone prayed and asked Him to. We don't know exactly when they stopped producing these, but it appears to be all over by the time of Abraham for certain. So that's when they were bound and weren't producing anymore, but they're still giants on the earth. And we see this in Deuteronomy 3, verse 11. For only Og, king of Bashan, remained of the remnants of the giants. Behold, his bedstead was a bedstead of iron. Is it not in Ramah of the children of Ammon? 9 cubits was the length thereof, and 4 cubits the breadth thereof, after the cubit of a man. Okay, now look at it. We don't have his exact size, but look at his bed size. Okay, 4 cubits is the cube of a man. Every a cubit is technically from the tip of someone's elbow to someone's fingertips. No standardization unless you make one. The royal cubit of Egypt, which is based on one of the Egyptians' kings, a normally proportioned person. A cubit is 4 cubits high of their own cubits. Let's say when that from the tip of the elbow to from the bottom of the elbow to the tip of the middle finger is 1/4 of their height if you're normally proportioned. And the royal cubit of Egypt is 20 inches, 20 and 2/3 inches. We don't have to speculate. It was, things were written that they were so long. They measured them, divide them by the number of cubits it said it was in Shazam. That's what it comes up with, which puts the king of that king of Egypt, that the royal cubit of Egypt was based off of, just a smidgen under 7 feet tall. And as we talked about before, the nations, their first king, their starter king, usually is a huge guy like Saul was. They want a king like the nations had. And he's usually the biggest guy around. So this cubit at 20 and 2/3 inches, 4 cubits would be 93 inches. Oh no, 4 cubits in a span, I'm sorry, would be 93 inches. 9 cubits would be 126 inches. I mean, 186 inches, I'm sorry, which is 15 foot 6 inches. So that puts this og. Let's give a gonna give him some room for his pillow and whatever. But but it puts him around maybe 14, 13 feet, 13 to 14 feet. Okay, so this is how, and we'll notice how broad his shoulders are, whatever the cubit his bed's 4 cubits wide, about 6 feet wide. Okay. Well, just a smidge under 7. I just said that about the royal cubit. Okay, so his bed's sitting there 15 and a half feet long, 7 feet wide. If your metric, if your metric, uh, if your metric, it's about 5 meters long and about 2 meters wide. Okay, so this is how big he is, and notice he's the last of the giants. And this is in the days of Moses. This is right before they enter the promised land, right after the wandering ended, and the eastern promised land they go into, the part east of the Jordan River. Moses couldn't cross the Jordan River to the western promised land. So this tells us when this was. So here's the flood, 1656. Somewhere in this area here, they quit. They quit. God puts an end to these angels creating new giants. All right. Let's just say it was even as late as Abraham. That makes this giant 500 years old. Okay. But possibly 900 years old. And this sort of bears out with this ideal again from all these different cultures. These giants were semi-mortal. They they did not die unless they were killed with violence somehow. They were going to die from disease and weren't going to die from old age or anything like that. So Og here is somewhere between 500 and 900 years old. And he's the last of the giants. So you think, well, okay, then Goliath couldn't be a giant. Well, he couldn't be a giant. No, that's true. But in Joshua 11, 21 through 22, we read about where his ancestors came from at the end of Joshua, at the end of the time of Joshua. And that time came Joshua, or at the end of his, I guess, taking possession of the promised land. That time came Joshua and cut off the Anakims from the mountains, from Hebron and from Debir and from Anab, and from all the mountains of Judah, and from all the mountains of Israel. Joshua utterly destroyed them with their cities. There was none left of the Anakim in the land of Israel, only in Gaza, in Gath, and Ashdod there remained. We'll get a little map out here. So now in Joshua's time, notice the Philistine. These are all the land of the Philistines: Gaza, Ashdod, Gathsan here. Okay, but it's one of these five cities of the Philistines, as opposed to the land of Israel. In the land of Israel at that time, because Joshua would kind of cut across this way. Okay, well, there's Gath. There's Gath. I'm sorry, one of their cities is missing. But kind of cut across this way. Ekron's missing, right? And it kind of and then kind of went up this way along the river quite a ways too. Okay, all the way up to way up here, and there's still much land left, but he conquered this L-shaped piece to make it so they could keep doing generation after generation. So Anak was a giant also, we're told. The Anakim were his descendants. So I mentioned these giants kept either marrying with human women or at least going into them and reproducing. But notice that with their cities, I mean, there was nothing to make cities of their own. And Joshua destroyed them. There weren't Canaanites living in these cities down here at Hebron and this so on and so forth. This area was all the land of the giants. The last place that these giants some giants lived, the descendants of the giants, I should say. Anak was already killed, was already died, but his descendants are here. And then they move over to here to Gath and over here. Now we're going to go read about the days of David. As we can see this when Joshua does this, the land's divide is about 2560 here. Roughly some 7 years after Og has died. And that had died before that, but his descendants were left, and they were all the way here to the time of David. David's born here 500 years, almost 500 years later. Well, he's born there, and he's about 20 years old when about the time of our story today, a little under 20 perhaps. So it's been almost exactly 500 years since the descendants of the giants, the last of them, the descendants of Anak, who was a giant, have been driven into Gath. Now we're going to get to that background. We're going to get into our narrative about David and Goliath and what David has to overcome. Now the Philistines gathered together their armies to battle, and were gathered together to Shoko, which belongs to Judah, and pitched between Shoko and Azekah in Ephes Dammim. And Saul and his men were gathered together to pitch in the valley of Elah and set the battle array against the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on one side, and Israel stood on the other side, and there was a valley between them. Okay. This valley between the valley Elah means oak or tamarisk tree. They ask, I suppose. But the point is, it indicates a place of strength and longevity. Okay, now, Sukkot means bushy, and Azekah means tilled. So notice there's two armies here, and they're in between these opposing conditions: land that's covered by bushes or brush, and land that's been cleared and tilled. And this place they're in is this place of blood. Ephes Dammim means boundary, the edge of blood, or the boundary of blood. Okay. So between them, there's this boundary of blood that's separating the bushy from the tilled, the uncivilized from the civilized, as it were. Those the Philistines are in the uncivilized place. Okay. This speaks of their wildness, of their barbaric ways, as it were. So now, and notice they're set the battle array. They're all lined up, got their shields set, ready to go to battle with the Philistines. on the mountain on this down here in the valley between them to come down the mountain and meet the Philistines in the valley and fight with them. However, there's disruption to their plan, to what to what the Israelites had planned here. And that's brought out to us in First Samuel 17. To continue on verses 4 and 7. Then when a champion out of the camp of the Philistines named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. He had a helmet, and he was armed with a coat of mail. And the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of brass. He had greaves of brass upon his legs, and a target of brass between his shoulders. The spear of his the shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron, and one bearing a shield went before him. Okay, there's really kind of a lot to talk about here because there's a little bit of things that aren't really quite right, not just in the King James translation, but in most of them. And and I'll show that here in a minute here. But you know, his name's Goliath's kind of a compound name, and it means a splendored exile. Okay, he's an exile because the Anakims, the Gath member of the cities of the Philistines that he's living among, and a splendor because of its large size, and perhaps and probably good looking as well. It doesn't say that, but that kind of gives the idea of being a splendor. All right, so he's a splendor in exile. This Goliath is, and the Gath is a wine press. We've mentioned that before. We were talking about Daniel I'm sorry, about Samson, Shamshon. I'm sorry, Shamshon. Okay, so his height here is just this 6. We'll get back to that. Now his helmet, we're going to look at that in a moment in the detail as well. He's coated with a coat of mail. Now notice the weight of that coat of mail, 5,000 shekels of brass. And if you remember, we looked at this before. A shekel is roughly 2/10 of an ounce. Okay, so he's wearing here 1,000 ounces of brass. A thousand ounces. 1,000 ounces is roughly a little over 80 pounds. Okay, his armor's like 85 pounds. Okay, that's his armor, just this coat. That's not counting the helmet, but it's just that coat, and not counting the greaves and the target. Now, notice the shaft is like a weaver's beam. It's about can't see my hands, but that's about take your hands and just make a circle with them with your thumbs joining it, your middle finger joining. That's roughly the size of a weaver's beam to give you an idea how big around it is. It's about 3 or 4 inches big around, all right, in diameter there. And now notice his spear weighed 600 shekels of iron, spearhead, just a spearhead. Now that 600 shekels of iron is about 7.5 pounds, or if you're metric, that's about 3.5 kilometers. I mean, not kilometers, I'm sorry, 3.5 kilograms. Okay. So, and again, an 85 would be about 41 kilograms as well for the weight of his brass for metric. Okay, but there's some things here we need to know about him that aren't quite. This height of 6 cubits in a span. A span is half a cubit. It's when you take your fingers, your hand, all the way across, make it as wide as it can. It's between your pinky and the end of your pinky and the end of your thumb. And if you do this in your normally proportioned, you'll find it's 1/2 of the distance between the tip of your elbow and the tip of your middle finger. It's half a cubit. The whole thing's a very handy system when you don't have anything else to measure with, as long as you know your own dimensions. So, but Is he really this tall? There's a question about that. What's it mean he's a champion too? Well, we're going to explain that in detail. This is a very exacting term the King James translators picked, and it's very fitting. And we'll see in a moment why that's fitting. But first, we're going to talk about his height. And there's a problem here with his height. Now here's his height. Here we are in 1 Samuel 17:4, and here's the Masoretic text. And here it says here in plain Hebrew, Sheth Amot. Sheshamot. Now, some people will say Seths but notice these little dots over the. Oh, in Paleo Hebrew, there were no dots. It's a rabbinic thing to accommodate the Sephardic who can't make the SH sound, just like we saw the people in Ephraim. Ephraim couldn't make it in that one case. All right, in that one case, and that's how they decided who could tell who was from that tribe. So they put they put a little dot and they make it sound like an S sometimes, even though there's another one, Samic, that makes the S. Okay, so it's really Shesh. All right, Shesh Amot means 6 cubits. Okay, all good. All right, let's get down to the Greek though. The Greek here is in the Septuagint, and this is the Greek translation of the Hebrew around 220 BC or so. Ptolemy III wanted to be able to read the scripture. He didn't have time to learn Hebrew, so he commissioned people to write it, to translate it into Greek for him. And notice what it says: Tesseron, Pikeon. There it is in plain Greek, Tesseron Pikeon, which means 4 cubits. Tesseron's 4. It comes from the root word tetra. Okay, tesseron. It's a variation of tetra. Tesseron, again, tesseron, Pikeon. So now there's a conflict here. Was Goliath 4 cubits or was he 6? The King James translators, well, they got a lot of from the work of William Tyndale. No, I'm sorry. William Tyndale's disciples did this one. From the Matthew Bible, translated by Miles Covendale, headed that up, finished up the work Tyndale was killed to prevent finishing. And they went from this Hebrew translation that was translated from the Masoretic text, okay, to do their translation work. So they put 6 because that's what it says here. However, the Dead Sea Scrolls says 4. Now, which is correct? Well, not the Dead Sea Scrolls, I'm sorry, the Septuagint. Well, enter the Dead Sea Scrolls. And the Dead Sea Scrolls actually say 4 in Hebrew too. They don't say shesh. Okay, word for 6. They say 4 instead. They agree with this. And it's not even like shesh and the word they use. If you're counting, a lot of people go delete, but dalit, which means it's the 4th letter. If they're writing it down. But anyways, they're not similar in spelling. It's not like a little grammatical mistake. They simply do not agree with one. They simply disagree with each other. Now, but in every single case where these two disagree, the Masoretic text and the Septuagint, the Dead Sea Scrolls agree with the Septuagint. And the significance of this is because it shows the Masoretic text was tampered with by the rabbis. Now here they inflated Goliath's size, made him larger than he really was. He was already quite large. At 4 cubits in a span, he's 93 inches, which puts him at 7'9". In the range of human possibility, which is again another reason why these descendants of the giants are going to have to be wiped out in the time of David, the last of them, because it's getting harder and harder to tell who the sins of these hybrids are. They're carrying it. They're not by the lineage of their fathers, by the lineage of their ancestries, all from Adam. From Adam alone. So let's say 7'9" is pretty darn big. If you're metric, if you're metric, that's like two and a half meters. Okay, it's roughly 2.4 meters. So I believe is correct. Yeah, right. About 2.4 meters is correct. Okay, so that's still pretty darn tall. Well, they inflate him to make him seem bigger. Well, they also mess with texts like Psalms 22. In Psalms 22, the Septuagint says this. It's considered a messianic text. No one disputes that. There's what it says about Messiah. They pierced my hands and feet. The Masoretic text says, like a lion, my hands and feet. And what the difference is that the Dead Sea Scrolls agree with the Septuagint, and they say they pierced my hands and feet. The word in question is the word lion is re into the yod right there, like it corresponds to the letter Y in English. And in the Dead Sea Scrolls, it ends with a vob, and the vob it's really between a V and W sound, like in Diwali from Indian language, from Hindi. Some other languages have that same sound, people can't make it, so you see translator is V or W, depending on who's speaking or whatever. And I also like the letter Y make a consonant sound or a vowel sound. So can this. And one of the sounds is U. Karu means they pierced. Okay. But let's just say this. Let's say over time, this here, the bottom part of this vav gets shut off. It could be mistaken for a yod. It could be, depending on the font. If that was it, okay, they made a little mistake, but it's in a whole lot of Messianic passages. The rabbis intentionally changed the Masoretic text because people were reading the text, Jewish people, and coming to the right conclusion that this was about Yeshua, Jesus, Messiah. That these would identify him. This Psalms 22 is what he's drawing everyone's attention to. And he says, my God, why have you forsaken me? That's the first line of Psalm 22. That tells about him being brought into the dust of death and brought out of it. His resurrection's in there as well, as a plain description of his crucifixion. So they mess with the Masoretic text. Inflating this giant here is still messing with the word of God and wrong. But, if they're untrustworthy in something minor, if they're not trustworthy in the little, they're not going to be trustworthy in the big either, as Messiah said. So don't be relying on the Masoretic text. Verify it against the Septuagint. Again, you can see in plain Hebrew, shesh, amot, 6 cubits. Here in plain Greek, tesseron pekon, peak. Yes, I'm getting some in my throat here. Pikaon. Okay, Pikaon. So this is important. So Goliath's really only 4 cubits and a span high, which is still 7'9", 2.4 meters. A big man. Okay, way over normal size. Now, next thing I want to talk to you about is this helmet of his. Now, and there's a little bit more we're talking about here with the Philistines as well. This is an actual relief from the Philistines. They were nice to leave us some carved pictures of themselves, them and their enemies. And we could sometimes their enemies have them like they got the Philistines captured. But in this relief, the Philistines are hauling off other people and you see this helmet of theirs, distinctive helmet. And so it goes up here and it's kind of like they're not really feathers, but they're metal. It's pretty effective for attacks from above, blocking someone from above. It protects up here, but it's leaves this little space here between the nose and about where your hairline would be. Okay, it's about where their hairline is on this cap. And so this is exposed. Now, next I want you to know about this Philistine picture, the actual Philistines. You may have read somewhere where they said, oh, they found the Philistines were actually Europeans, the DNA or whatever. No, what they found was a European, the remains of someone of European ancestry in the land of Philistia. That does not guarantee they were a Philistine. Fortunately, we have actual pictures that give us clues. Notice the thickness of the lips, similar to Africans. The shape of the nose, similar to Africans, right here at the end particularly. Notice the eye shape, very much like that you see in the tombs of Egypt of the Egyptians, and even the ear shape here. Okay, the earlobe shape and everything shows they're closely related to the Egyptians, which is, by the way, what Scripture says. Says they came out of Metzerim. It talks about them when it first talks about in Genesis 10, which is Egypt. Okay, they came out of Egypt. They're related to the Egyptians, and this relief shows that. So yes, just because they dug up some body in what's Gaza Strip today, and maybe it was from back the time of Moses or Noah or whatever, not Noah, Abraham, doesn't mean that body was a Philistine. It means it was some European, and it happened all the time because the Greeks were in trade with down there. They got European ancestry, obviously. Other nations, they were in trade with Egypt. Finding a body there that has European DNA really is no evidence at all about the Philistines being European. However, pictures they left of themselves, well, those are real evidence about what they look like in their ancestry. And again, it matches the word of God. So Goliath, remember, he's an exile splendor, or a celebrated exile, would be a way to say it, because they live among the Philistines, but they're not Philistines. But because they live among them, they're called that. So now we're going to continue on here in Matthew 17, verses 8 through 11. He stood and cried with the armies of Israel and said to them, why are you come out to set your battle in array? Am not I a Philistine, your servants, and you servants to Saul? Choose you a man for you and let him come down to me. If he will be able to fight with me and to kill me, we will be your servants. If I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us. And the Philistines said, I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together. And when Saul and all Israel heard the words of the Philistine, they were dismayed, and greatly afraid. Okay, I mentioned a giant, appropriately translated there. I mean, champion. Okay, what was a champion in the time of the King James, or from before that, in the history of the British Isles? A champion was two armies, instead of fighting it out to settle a matter, the kings, both sides would send a champion who would fight it out and decide the matter. Okay, typically they'd fight to the death, and and the terms were set. If your champion wins, we're going to do this for you. If our champion wins, you're going to do this for us. So Saul is literally a champion. This has nothing to do with being, winning a singing contest on TV or anything like that. Or, this is what he is. This is what he's been doing his whole life. This is why he's a celebrator of splendor. Okay. Is this exile, because they haven't lost with this man, with him. And they refer to him as a Philistine here. They fight because he's living among the Philistines. Am I not a Philistine? Well, he is, because he's living among them, just like someone that lives in Israel becomes an Israeli citizen, can be an Israeli, but he's not by ancestry a Philistine. Or perhaps partly. his mother may, he may have some Philistine in the mix as well, but he's definitely got this descendant of Anak. He's a descendant of Anak as well as giants. So now look, they're all dismayed and greatly afraid. Dismayed means they just don't know what to do. They're out there. They came out there ready to fight it out with the Philistines. Saul's been leading them and being destructive of the Philistines, and the Philistines pull out something they didn't expect. This big old giant. And Saul is now something he's never had to face himself his entire life. Remember, Saul was taller than the next man in Israel, only came up to his shoulders. Now Saul is facing someone who's much taller than him. Perhaps he only comes to the shoulder of Goliath. Perhaps not even that far, you know. So Saul is facing someone bigger than him. He's never faced him before, and he doesn't know what to do. And he's greatly afraid, along with all of Israel, because they know they can't fight this man and take him. So he's defying the armies of Israel. He's mocking them. Okay, now we'll see in a minute how long this goes on. Now, David, in our next section here, in 1 Samuel 17:12 through 16. Now, David was the son of the Ephrathite of Bethlehem, Judah, whose name was Jesse. He had 8 sons, and the man went among men for an old man in the days of Saul. And the oldest sons of Jesse went and followed Saul to the battle. And these of his 3 sons that went to the battle were Eliab, the firstborn. Next to him were Abinadab, and the third Shammah. David was the youngest, and the 3 eldest followed Saul. And David returned from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. And the Philistines drew near morning and evening, and presented themselves 40 days. Okay, so when this battle happened, remember Saul made David his armor bearer, but he didn't take him with him. And he was favored, but he's young. And perhaps Saul, even though it had been testified to him, he seems to, kind of one ear out the other. He's supposedly focused on this guy's music playing. He was a man of valor and a man of war, had done some fighting against perhaps Philistine raiders himself. And so Saul just sent him back to take care of back to his house while this battle's going on. However, who did follow Saul were Eliab, Abinadab, and Shammah. And what's interesting about them is those are the 3 that were given by name that Samuel passed over. They're following Saul, and we're going to see that following Saul, they're going to behave like Saul also. They're following him. They're following him to the battle. He has drafted him, as we saw last time, but they're also following him in his behavior. Remember, their hearts are not right. David's is. So and now this goes on for 40 days. Now, 40 days, what should this remind us of? Well, it should remind us of the flood, for one thing. 40 days and 40 nights, it rained. It should remind us, it speaks of judgment. It speaks of judgment and trial, okay? Messiah was tempted 40 days and 40 nights. Okay. So the time of trial of Israel is being tried, and judgment's going to come at the end of it. It's going to come at the end of this 40 days, as we'll see. And 40 years in the wilderness, one for every day the spies went to the promised land. Okay. Again, a trying and a judgment that followed. Time of trying and judgment. Try to weigh the hearts of the people of Israel. In 1 Samuel 17, verse 17 through 22, we continue on and we see what we start with what Jesse does about this. It's been 40 days. These battles are typically, we've been reading, short. Most time these battles last 1, 2, 3 days, once in a while a week. 40 days, Jesse's wanting to know what is going on. So so we're gonna pick up with there of Jesse. Yeshai, David, which means beloved, his father. And Yeshai said unto David, his son, take now for your brethren an ephah of this parched grain and these 10 loaves, and run to the camp of your brethren, and carry these 10 cheeses to the captain of their 1,000. And look how your brother fare, and take their pledge. Now Saul and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah, fighting with the Philistines. And David rose up in the morning and left the sheep with a keeper, and and went as Jesse had commanded him. And he came to the trench. The host was going forth to fight, and shouted for the battle. For Saul was going forth to fight and shout for the okay. For Israel and the Philistines have put the battle in array, army against army. And David left his carriage in the hand of his carriage in the hand of the keeper of the carriage, and ran into the army and came and saluted his brethren. Okay, we say carriage today, but carriage is correct. Something that's carried. He left by carrying the hand of the person in charge of that. This guy was in charge of watching the stuff when people brought it. You're going to see. So he ran into the army. And he comes and salute his brother. So he's left the cheese and the bread over here. Notice these 10 loaves. These are like pita loaves. Don't think of loaves of Wonder Bread or whatever. This parched corn's for later. And it's not, and again, corn means grain. You know, it's either barley or wheat that's been parched, depending on what time of year this is. Okay. And these 10 cheeses are for the captain, not for them. Okay, so he's going to take their pledge, and get some sort of promise about their pledge, about take their pledge, perhaps a promise of the verification of the news about how they're doing, and so on and so forth. Or perhaps they promise to get something from and you give something and send it home. But anyway, that's what he was sent to do. But now, so he goes there, he leaves the stuff, and he goes to find his brothers. Now, so he goes to his brothers first, even before the captain of their 1,000. Of course, he didn't know who that is, so he didn't need to go to the brothers first. But he's going to the captain. He's going to his brothers first. And this is when Goliath, comes up again at the end of these 40 days. And we see this as we see in 1 Samuel 17, 23 through 26. As he talked to them, behold, there came up the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, out of the armies of the Philistines, and spoke according to the same words. And David heard them. And all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from before him, or sore afraid. The men of Israel said, have you seen this man that has come up? Shall he defy Israel as he come up? And it shall be that the man who kills him, the king will enrich him with great riches, and will give his daughter, and make his father's house free in Israel. And David spake to the men that stood by him, saying, what shall be done to the man that kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God? Okay. So Goliath came out and done his daily rant, mocking Israel, defying them. Come on, you got, except, smack talking Israel, as we'd say, people might say. And it meant they said that they're running away. They're so afraid. Well, the fact is they can't take him. They're not wrong in that. Remember what God told Joshua and them, that the nations were too large for them, that the people were too big. They outnumbered them, and there was more of them, more nations, and each nation had more people, and they were larger. And they could not do it on their own. but he would go before them, take care of what they could, and they were to fall behind him and mop up. Well, these men don't have God going before them. They cannot take him. So the men are talking to each other about what the king will do, how serious this problem has become, because it's causing Israel to lose face day after day. I mean, they've given up a chance of seeing a champion. So they were all arrayed in battle again after 40 days. They're just going to go fight them and hope maybe a bunch of them together can gang up on this Philistine and kill him or something like that. But they're just going to fight the army. They can't take him up on this offer. They can't let, and the king said he just can't have this offer going on. And he's desperate. He's gonna give them and he's gonna give benefits to these people. And these benefits to whoever does is in a way mirror the benefits we're promised in the Bible to the overcomer. The king will give him his daughter. What's it means? If you marry the king's daughter, you're brought into the king's family by marriage. Okay. Enrich him with great riches, and his house can be free in Israel. Well, if we overcome, in Revelation it says those who overcome will be priests and kings, in the kingdom of Messiah. We'll be brought into his family and free in Israel. We're going to be free. Well, it's free, and what it means here is they're free from taxes, etc. Okay. We're going to be the recipient of Messiah's process. We're going to be gathering tribute for him and bringing to him. We're going to get to keep part of it. That's where we're going to get our great riches from. Okay, but we're not going to have to be out working and paying tribute. So that's sort of an application to us. And notice, and so now everyone's afraid of this man. But David, look at David's response. Everyone else is afraid, but David has a totally different attitude about this. First, he wants to know, what's that reward you were talking about? And notice he stressed he's uncircumcised. He doesn't have a covenant with God. He's defying the armies of the living God. They are circumcised. They have a covenant with the living God. He recognizes this is deeper than just trash talking the Israelites. It's really about defaming the living God. All right. Now we're going to look at what. Now we're looking at the response of the people to what David just said. And the people, as we continue on here in 1 Samuel 17:27-30, the people answered them after this manner, saying, so it shall be done to the man that kills him. And Eliab, his older brother, heard when he spoke unto the men. And Eliab's anger was kindled against David, and he said, why came you down to here? With whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your pride and the nighness of your heart. You are come down that you might see the battle. David said, what have I done now? Is there not a cause? He turned from him towards another and spake after the same manner, and people answered him again after the former manner. Okay, notice there's Eliab, which is David's own family. There's the people, the rest of people who don't belong in this family. And notice his family, he goes to them first. He came to see his brothers. And notice they reject him. They're kindled against him. Eliab, or Eliab, however you prefer. Eliab, my God, Father. My God is Father. Or my Father is God. Okay, my God is Father. Be more accurate. My God is Father. Okay. The people of God he's representing here, the people of Israel at large, are rejecting the anointed one. mostly. And who's accepting him? Everyone else. They're at least not rejecting him out of hand. And he makes a false he says, why he says, notice you left those few sheep in the wilderness. With whom have you left them? He didn't leave them with anyone. He put them in a sheep coat, and the keeper of the sheep washed them, which again, as I mentioned before, Jesse obviously has servants. David could have invited to the feast in the first place. He had to be out with the sheep. There are other people that could have done that. Or give him the sheep coat. But his accusation was he abandoned the sheep. Okay, the good shepherd will lay down his life for the sheep. He's accusing him of being a bad shepherd. And as I know your pride and nighness of your heart. He thinks David is acting in pride, and David's not acting in pride at all. David's the one that Saul anointed. Samuel, Shemuel, Samuel anointed. Nighness of your heart, rejecting him, assuming what his purposes. And as David responds, he just goes to someone else. He turns another, like Shaul, after some Jews in some of these places he went. He happens 3 times, rejected Messiah and brought persecution. He said, lo, I turn to the Gentiles. Well, lo, he's turning to someone from outside his own family now. And they're just giving him the facts. He's being if not hated, at least persecuted by his brother without a cause, just like Messiah was. Now, we'll continue on here in First Samuel 17, verse 31 through 33. And when the words were heard which David spake, they rehearsed them before Saul, and he sent for them. And David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight with the Philistine. And Saul said to David, thou art not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, but you are but a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. Okay, David's got confirmation, so he went to go. And notice he didn't actually go to Saul, waited until he was sent for him. But David is the only one talking victory. Everyone else is afraid. And David says, I'll take him on. And Saul's response, he's looking at his outward appearance. You're but a youth. Now, he seems to have forgotten who David was. David was playing the harp. And a good explanation I saw that was a reenactment of this. David was behind a curtain, so he couldn't be seeing what the king's business was while he's playing the music, which was very common back in that day thing to do. So yeah, I saw David once, really liked him, sent him home, but I hadn't really thought much about him being a warrior. He wants to know what makes you think you're able to do this. You're young. You're not even old enough to be in the army. It tells he's below 20, or if he's 20, he should be in the army. Only his oldest 3 brothers are there, but he's probably old enough to be in the army. This Hebrew word for youth kind of indicates that. Perhaps he's 19, just a little bit under, and this guy's been fighting these battles, being a champion, all this stuff ever since he was a youth himself, and he's now quite a bit older. He may have been that several hundred years. If the descendants of the giants live as long, were kind of semi-mortal, as it were, like the giants were. So that Goliath's been out a long time. We're reading 1 Samuel 17, verse 34 through 37. And David said to Saul, your servants kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear and a lamb, and took a lamb out of the flock. I went after him and smote him, delivered it out of his mouth. And when he arose against me, I caught him by his beard and smote him and slew him. Your servant slew both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing he has defied the armies of the living God. And David said, moreover, the Lord delivered me out of the paw of the lion, out of the paw of the bear. He will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said to David, go, and the Lord be with you. Okay, David gives his past experiences, his resume, as it were, here. A lion and a bear. And the lions back then were in Israel were probably the Mesopotamian lion. They went extinct in the Roman Colosseum. They were considered the second most fierce lions in the world, the most fierce being, which also went extinct in the Roman Colosseum, the European lion. The European lion was twice as large and lived in caves, is twice as large as an African lion. In fact, the Romans have one record of where they went to go capture one for the Colosseum. They managed to capture it, but it killed 200 men in the process. A small army of 200 men died in the process of capturing this one European lion. Well, the Mesopotamian lion was bigger than the African lion today, much bigger than the Asian lion. So it's a sizable thing. But Asia, the only place where bears and lions both live, I mean, in India, in the Gura rainforest, when a bear moves in, the lion actually moves out. The lions will actually move out. So they're kind of, so you can kind of rank these: bear, lion, Goliath. All right. So David could not deliver that. He said he did this with his bare hands. Notice he smote him. Well, maybe he hit him with his sling or something there, or a stick. But I caught him by the beard, grabbed him by his bare hand, and struck him and slew him. Now that appears to be the bear he did that with. He slew both of them when they came to get one. And notice, uncircumcised Philistine. He brings this up again. This guy didn't have a covenant with God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The armies of the living God have a covenant. He's I'm not going to let him defy. I'm not going to let him trash talk. Ultimately, he's talking about the living God. He's not going to let him trash talk. Okay. And notice David recognized he wasn't able to go. He didn't do this in his own strength and went out there and killed this lion with his bare hands. He wasn't doing his own strength when he killed perhaps with a staff, perhaps in his bare hands. He wasn't doing the same. He wasn't even able to his own strength when he did that with a bear. And he doesn't expect. He's looking to the Lord to deliver him out of the hand of this Philistine. He recognizes the Lord's the reason he's able to do this. So Saul lets him go and let the Lord be with you. Because Saul knows David don't have a chance unless the Lord's helping him. He at least has gotten smart. He's at least smart to recognize that. Well, let's continue on here in Samuel 17, verse 38 through 40. And we're looking at David overcoming his Goliath here. Saul armed David with his armor, and he put a helmet of brass on his head, and he also armed with a coat of mail. And David girded his sword on his armor, and he essayed to go, for he had not proved it. And David said to Saul, I can let go of these, for I have not proved them. And David put them off from him. He took his staff in his hand and chose him 5 smooth stones out of the brook, put them in a shepherd's bag which he had, even in a scrip, and his sling was in his hand. They drew near to the Philistine. Okay. Saul is trying to give David the best he can in military equipment at the time. Remember, Goliath has all these: a helmet of brass, and brass is an alloy of copper and iron. It's much harder than bronze, which is an alloy of copper and tin. Okay, and that coat of mail probably like iron, like Goliath's was. So he's making them on kind of equal footing here as far as his weapons go. A sword, okay, but David's not used to them. That's what it means by proved. And he essayed to go means he thinks not. He's hesitant to go with those. He doesn't. So he takes them off. And there's something here. Notice what he does. He took what he's used to, his staff that perhaps he smote the bear and the lion with. It's 5 smooth stones, and his sling. He's using what he's familiar with. And this is an important lesson for us here. The world will always be telling you, you need this, you need that, blah, blah, blah. and try to convince you you do not have what it takes without those things, but you're not familiar with them. David's going to use all these things later, but he needs time to get familiar with them first. The companies do this all the time. They say they're going to upgrade. They try to upgrade radically, and well, instead of starting small, the small part, getting people trained on this newer equipment, and then rolling it out, they try to do it all at once, and they don't, and they get, it's disastrous for them. It costs a lot of money, and they don't know how to use it properly. They haven't worked at the kinks, and then they haven't gotten used to it. So David is going to stick with what he's used to, even though it looks inferior to the latest military equipment. It's what he knows how to use, and that's what he's going to go with, because his reliance is not on equipment, it's on the living God. So we're going to continue on here in First Samuel 17, verse 41 through 44. And the Philistine came and drew near to David. The man that bare the shield went before him. And again, when the Philistine looked about and saw David, disdained him, for he was but a youth and ruddy and a fair countenance. And the Philistine said to David, am I a dog that you come with me with staves? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, come to me, and I'll give your flesh to the fowls of the air and to the beasts of the field. Okay, so he has a man going in front of him. When he gets where he can see, as the man drops on the shield, he disdains David. He thinks this is a joke, because David's a youth. He's young, ruddy. He's been out in the field. His skin's turned reddish from being out in the sun. Fair countenance. Now, fair, don't think of fair skin like we say that day. Fair in King James time meant beautiful or handsome. He's a good look. He's a good looking. He's kind of a pretty boy in a way, people would say, perhaps in America. And he's not some scarred warrior, some fierce looking scarred warrior. He's sort of a pretty boy, and he's young, and he's not even full grown. He's not 20 yet. The text would seem to indicate. So, I come at you with, you come to me with staves, a dog. Interesting choice, because the Gentile sons of the Greek, they would refer to them as dogs because of certain things they did involve homosexuality, but also because they counted like dogs because the way they lived in general. Okay, remember the Philistines are on the bushy side, the wild side, the uncivilized side, and they're on the tilled side. Okay, so yeah, you come out like a dog with a stick. You come out a dog with a stick or run off generally, even if it's a pretty good sized dog. You can usually beat it off with a stick most of them they'll just run away from you. They're kind of a German Shepherd or something. So, once they see you got a way to hurt them, they'll run off. Now he says he's gonna leave his dead body out there for the animals to eat. Just come on. Like, see it all the time in action movies where guys like moving his fingers. Bring it on. Come on. So that's what he's saying here to David. Now we're looking at David's response back to him. All right, he's at his little trash talk, his little pre-battle trash talking session. Now it's David's turn. Except David's not really talking trash at all or smack. He's going to give him straight up facts. Then David said to the Philistine, you come to me with a sword, with a spear, and with a shield. But I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defiled. This day the Lord deliver you into my hand, and I will smite you and take your head from you. And I'll give the carcasses of the host of the Philistines this day to the fowls of the air. and to that wild beast of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. And all his assembly shall know that the Lord saves not with sword or spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. Okay. David gets right down to Goliath had cursed him in the names of his gods, the gods of the Philistines, Dagon, so on and so forth. It is really a battle between these false gods, these idols, these nothings, whose power behind them is demons that we talked, evil spirits we talked about last time. The word gods and demons are used interchangeably, or evil spirits are used interchangeably throughout Scripture. And the living God, the God of the armies of Israel, the God they're in covenant with, the God, the creator of heaven and earth, the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, the only God there really is. So this is not a battle between weapons and warriors. It's a deeper battle. It's a spiritual battle as well as a physical battle. And because of that, the Lord is going to deliver you into my hands and I'll smite you and cut your head out and take your head from you. And notice he's not going to stop with Goliath. I'll give the carcass of the host of the Philistines this day. He's going after the whole army of the Philistines by himself, Samson style, if he has to. Okay, Shamshon style or Shamgar style. No one else. He'll go fight him. He'll take them all down by himself. And what's the purpose of this? So all the earth may know there is a God in Israel. He's been defying the armies of Israel. By so doing, he's defaming the God of Israel, the God in Israel. And notice the concern, it's about the Gentiles. All the earth, the Gentiles may know there's a God in Israel. And as I said, this story, is not even in people, and even places that aren't even really Christian places or Jewish, know this story. It's famous. It's taught in schools and whatever. Okay. And this is all about the Gentiles knowing there's a God in Israel. Israel already knows there's a God in Israel. The Philistines, based on previous encounters we looked at, should definitely know this as well. But this is about the human race knowing it. And all this assembly, the people of Israel that it is, are going to know the Lord didn't save with sword and spear. The battle is the Lord. He will give you into our hands. The battle is the Lord. He's counting on Israel is going to follow him, his lead, after he kills Goliath and goes after the army of the Philistines. But he knows he's not doing this his own strength. He's doing it because the Lord is going to do it. And we'll look at why he's so confident in the end of why he's so confident the Lord's going to do this. Why no one else can have this confidence. In fact, indeed, why no one else could have done this. Well, in 1 Samuel 48 through 51, the battle royale sets in. We're going to see how it ends. And it came to pass when the Philistine arose and came and drew nigh to meet David, David hastened and ran towards the army to meet the Philistine. And David put his hand in his bag and took from there a stone and slang it and smote the Philistine on his forehead. And the stone sunk in his forehead, and he fell upon his face to the earth. So David rebelled over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, and smote the Philistine, and slew him, but there was no sword in the hand of David. Therefore David ran and smote upon the Philistine, took his sword, drew it out of its sheath thereof, and slew him, and cut his head off therewith. When the Philistines saw their champion was dead, they fled. It kind of was twice dead. He smote him in his forehead and slew him. He fell over. He's as good as dead. He cuts his head off. There's no doubt he's dead. Now, remember what the taunt that the Goliath kept saying was, if you kill our champion, we'll be your servants. So they see their champion's dead. They're fleeing. They had no intention of keeping their deal. Kind of like Hamas today. David's not going to be played like President Trump. He realized he knew all along they were going to do this. They forgot all about their agreement to be the slaves of Israel if Israel's champion, which was David, won, which he did. Now, in 1 Samuel, and David's coming for them as well, as he said, he ran towards the army, remember. Goliath was a pit stop. He was just between him and the army as far as he is concerned. It's something he had to deal with first. He had to overcome Goliath and continue with his business. Now we're going to look at the result of all this on everyone, all the rest of the assembly of Israel. In 1 Samuel 17, verse 52 to 54, read the following. The men of Israel and Judah arose and shouted and pursued the Philistines till you come to the valley and to the gates of Ekron. And the wound of the Philistines fell down by the way to Shaaraim, even unto Gath and to Ekron. And the children of Israel returned from chasing the Philistines, and they spoiled their tents. And David took the head of the Philistine and brought to Jerusalem. They put his armor in his tent. Okay, now they're following. Remember, we talked about the anointing. We showed that with Gideon. I don't think it was Jephthah. Anyway, the judges and with Saul, and the anointing caused the people when they were just somewhat willing to have courage and follow suit. And so it has. David was anointed, the Spirit of God came upon him and stayed upon him. Unlike Saul, who had left it still on David. And now notice what he does with his head. They're spoiling the tents of the Philistines after they kill all they can. And David goes to Jerusalem. Now, why does he take this head to Jerusalem? Because he's showing the Jebusites. They're in Jerusalem. Israel does not have control there. All around there, Israel has control, but not this Jerusalem. He lives 8 miles from it. Saul lives not far from it on the other side. And Samuel, and these Jebusites live in the middle. He's showing them that, hey, this is what happens to those who defy the living God. Let them know, I'm coming for you. And he puts his armor, the armor of Saul, in his tent. Now, that's Saul of Goliath, the head of Goliath in his tent. He puts the armor of Goliath in his tent, not Saul, I'm sorry. And now we're going to see about Saul. And we're going to see what Saul, let's even do it last time. How does he react? And when Saul saw David go forth against the Philistine, he said to Abner, captain of the host, Abner, whose son is this youth? And Abner said, as my soul lives, O king, I cannot tell. The king said, inquire to you whose son the stripling is. And as David returned from the slaughter of the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul with the head of the Philistine in his hand. And Saul said to him, whose son are you, young man? David answered, I am the son of Jesse, of your servant Jesse, the Bethlehemite. Okay. Saul had sent him away, and in 40 days forgot. Remember, his mind's going. He's not quite occupant Biden bad, but his mind's going, okay? This guy, they've been playing music for him for however long. He sent him home 40 days earlier, but just probably didn't even look and just said, just dismiss, go back to your father's or whatever till this war's over. But he reminds him, the son of Jesse, the Bethlehemite. And Abner means father light, okay? So Shaul, Saul, sought after. So David is now made himself known to the king, Saul, that he is that indeed the living God has the anointing on, he has that anointing on him as well. He brings in the proof of it with his head of Goliath. David overcame his Goliath. And there's a secret to that we're going to look at before we close out. Because he's following a pattern that was set before in the time of the judges. And we see this in the life of Samson in particular. In Samson 14, verse 5 and 6 read the following. When Samson went down, his father and his mother to Timnath, and came to the vineyards of Timnath, and behold, a young lion roared against him. And the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and he rent him as he would a kid. He had nothing in his hand, but he told not his father and mother what he had done. Okay, remember, he had saw this maid of Timnath, this Philistine girl he wanted to marry. And when the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, he killed the lion with his bare hands. He had nothing in his hand. David smote him. He may have had his staff. He may a reference to his staff, or maybe even a sling. But Samson had nothing. How can he do that? The Spirit of the Lord gave him superhuman ability. So the Spirit of the Lord comes on someone. It's not just about causing people to rally behind you for the cause of God always. Samson never anyone rallied. The only thing they rallied was to arrest him and hand him over to the Philistines. But he had this supernatural ability to come upon him when the Spirit of the Lord came upon him. In Judges 15, verse 14 through 15, we read another incident about Samson, a very famous one. And he came, the second most well-known one probably. And he came unto Lehi. The Philistines shouted against him. The Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him. And the cords that were upon his arm became as flax burnt with fire, his bands loosed from his hands. They found a new jawbone of an ass and put his hand and took it and slew 1,000 men therewith. Or remember, the only time Israel and the tribe, in particular his own tribe and Dan in this particular case, and he encouraged the build of an army was to arrest Samson and hand him over to the Philistines. And Samson went along with it just as long as they hurt himself because he didn't want to have to kill them. Okay. And when the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, these thick ropes, he couldn't just break them like they were, flax is very strong, but think of tissue paper, but it's burnt tissue paper, just falls right apart. His bands were loose from his hands. They put some iron bands or whatever. They just broke them off. Okay. And he used what he could find and slew 1,000 men with this time. He's using a weapon, but he didn't do this in his own strength. And neither did David. David knew he couldn't do this without the Lord. The Lord was going to be the one that gave him the strength to do it. Yeah, he was used to that sling, and he was practicing with it. But his precision he had to hit that one spot in the forehead that would bring Goliath to at least unconsciousness, if not death. Yeah, I could have smacked him in the nose or something and caused him, serious pain or put an eye out or something. The only place that wasn't covered where you could give him a fatal shot, not with a spear or sword, it'd be difficult because of the size and the length, but with this rock. With a sling, I saw a guy demonstrate with a modern sling. It had the same penetrating power. Found somebody that really knows what they're doing, has the strength and skill, can fling a sling with the same penetrating power as a 357 Magnum. It's like Goliath brought a big knife, but David brought a gun. Okay, David, but the Lord, that shot had to be. He ran towards him. He had one shot at this. It had to be perfect. It had to be strong and go deep, and it did. That was the Spirit of the Lord coming mightily upon him. I mean, that wasn't natural. And this is why and this is what we see. And we see this with Sam. This is why is the only one who could take out Goliath, the only one. Because here's what we read in 1 Samuel 16:13 from last week. Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brethren, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon David from that day forward. And Samuel arose and went to Ramah. David did these things by the Spirit of the Lord coming upon him. This is how David overcame Goliath. And with us, it's the same way. Now, in this day, the Spirit of the Lord came upon Amos. I believe it was his name. No, maybe it was Micah. Micah 8:3, I think. Anyways, came upon him and with power, came upon Paul, the Apostle Paul. The back of the gospel was demonstrations of power. It didn't just come with enticing words. So there is that aspect. But this is David. But there's another aspect, and the one that's just important, that's needed, that David plainly had, and that's internal power, not external. Okay? Sometimes you need both, but you got to have the internal, or the external will never happen. David had this incredible confidence the whole time because of the anointing. And so it was with Zechariah, as it was going to be I should say, it was Zerubbabel, according to the message the Lord gave to him through Zechariah. And he answered and spoke to me, saying, "This is the word of the Lord to Zerubbabel, saying, not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, says the Lord of hosts. Who are you, O great mountain? Before Zerubbabel you shall become a plain. He shall bring forth the headstone thereof with shouting, crying, grace, grace unto it. Moreover, the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, that the hands of Zerubbabel have laid the foundation of this house. His hand shall also finish it. You shall know that the Lord of hosts has sent me unto you." Okay. How's Zerubbabel? This great mountain represents an obstacle that Zerubbabel cannot overcome on his own, but it's going to become a plain, because not by might, not by power, not by Zerubbabel going out there with some sort of mighty, doing some more mighty deed like Samson, or not by power and leading an army or whatever, but by the Spirit of God. Every obstacle is going to be cleared out of the way for Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel is going to finish it. He's going to know the Lord of hosts has sent me unto you, because you're going to finish it. He's going to start. Zerubbabel is going to have confidence to begin it. Notice, bring the headstone with shouting, grace, grace to it. Counting on the grace of God to get him through, to grace him through whatever obstacles there are. And these obstacles are going to be overcome because of the Spirit of the Lord. Just like David had the Spirit of the Lord on him. Now, in Ephesians 3, verse 16 through 19, we see the same thing applies to us. He would grant you, according to the riches of his glory, to be strengthened with might by his Spirit in the inner man, that Christ may dwell in your hearts by faith, that you being rooted in love and grounded in love, may be able to comprehend with all the saints what is the breadth, the length, the depth, and the height, and to know the love of Christ, which passes knowledge, that you may be filled with all the fullness of God. You can be filled with everything God has for you, all the fullness, everything he wants to give you. How you do this, you're strengthened by might, by his Spirit, where? The outer man, like Samson, the inner man. David was strong on the inside before he ever showed his strength on the outside. He believed the words of Samuel, Shemuel, when he was anointed. He believed the Spirit of God came upon him, and he knew that whatever he faced was no match for the Spirit of God. But that spirit that he meditated on the Word of God day and night, like Joshua had been told to. Perhaps some of the Psalms were even written like the Lord is my shepherd, while he was before he ever faced Goliath. It caused him to comprehend the love of God, the love of Messiah. God, we are strengthened by the inner man when Christ dwells in our hearts by faith. And David had faith in the Messiah that was to come. He was filled with the fullness of God. And so can we be. We can be filled with everything God, full of everything God means for us to have by being strengthened by His Spirit in our inner man. That's where it must begin. And we're going to end with this verse here in 2 Timothy 1:2, verse 1:7. That contrast that spirit David had with, and that we should have with that of the rest of those who lack the Spirit of God. For God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. The rest of Israel didn't have the Spirit of God, and they were afraid. And the truth is, they could not overcome Goliath. David could not overcome Goliath on his own. He can only come with the help of God. He recognized that. But he had been given the Spirit of God. And so have we, and that Spirit is a spirit of power and love and a sound mind. We're not, those things that David was accused of were false, and so will they be of us. We're doing things out of love. This power that we have, authority, and dynamos. I'm not sure which word it is here. I didn't look it up, but dunamis. But either way, that it's given to us because we have love for people and we have a sound mind. We're not doing crazy, rational things, even though the world may think it's crazy. They had to think it was crazy, David, going out there without any armor, no protection. It's a sling and a stone and a staff. And he's going to take down not just Goliath, he said, but he was ready to take out the whole Philistine army. By himself, he had to. But he wasn't crazy. He had a sound mind. It may have looked crazy. To the world, it will look crazy. Sometimes what God tells us to do. But we have a sound mind because we've been given a spirit of a sound mind. And if you're in fear, that's not from God. God did not give you a spirit of fear. That's from the enemy. And if you've been born again, the Spirit of God dwells in you. And you need to start confessing this word over your own life. That you are going to be able to overcome your Goliath. Because not by you figuring it out on your own and through your own strength and might and your own power, but through the Spirit of God giving you the power. The Spirit of God, that spirit of love, having you use that power for the right reason. That spirit of God giving you a sound mind. That's going to come with a plan that's going to work, even if it looks crazy to everyone else. Because if God's in it, it will work out. But us believers should never be like the men of Israel. When a Goliath shows up, we're there to overcome it. And the reason why these giants lasted so long all the way to the time of Goliath, because Goliath was the event, was the thing, the catalyst that's going to catapult David. It turns him into a hero in the eyes of Israel and catapults him in the eyes of Israel to lead them as their greatest leader, their greatest king. God allowed all that other stuff to occur just for that reason. And whatever's going on in your life, whatever Goliath you're facing, God has allowed that to come around so you, with the help of his spirit, can bring it down so that he can get the glory and all the world knows that the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is the only God there is. That he has a son, Messiah, Yeshua, Jesus, that he raised from the dead. That's why God's going to allow Goliath in your life that perhaps has been centuries in the making, raised up so you can bring him down for the glory of God. Go out there and overcome your Goliath. That's all I have for you this week. Until next week, shalom.